Okay, Adolf Hitler. This guy, right? Piece of work, this guy. You know who this guy is. He didn't like the Jews, remember? But do you know his story? Like, his origin story. All villains have an origin story because everyone's born a baby, even Hitler. And there's no such thing as an evil baby. They're not real, I promise. So let's explore. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20th of 1889 in a small town of Austria called Braunau am Inn. That's the best you're going to get, all right? He grew up in a two-parent household. So already, if you grew up with a single parent and you're not Hitler, good job. Granted, his father was a drunk and abusive. His mother, though, was a sweet woman. They never learned, these women, always going for the bad guy. Why? And they were cousins. Weird. Anyway, they had 3 kids before they had Hitler, but unfortunately, they all died before he was born. After they had Hitler, they gave him a younger brother, Edmund, but sadly, he died at the age of 6 when Hitler was only 11. This was hard for Hitler. They were very close, and Edmund's death changed him. He went from being a regular, more or less happy kid to becoming kinda goth, listening to Blink-182 and My Chemical Romance. JK. But he did become like a major sad boy. Adolf and his dad did not get along. He wanted to be an artist, but his dad wanted him to have a more traditional career. Specifically, he wanted him to work for the government. And hey, eventually he would. Just with a lot more genocide than he had hoped for, I'm sure. Hitler was actually a pretty good student at first, but his dad enrolled him in a school that focused on science and technology, which Hitler hated, and so his grades took a dive. Hitler also went to church a lot with his mom. His mom was a devout Catholic, and Hitler even sang in the church choir at the Benedictine monastery. Some people even say that he wanted to become a priest as a kid, but many historians are skeptical of this detail because there's evidence that he was already becoming interested in pan-Germanism, which is a political ideology all about the unification of all German-speaking people, and it downplayed the importance of religion. But whatever the case, a childhood friend recounts that after Hitler left home, he never attended Catholic Mass again. So even if he was religious as a child, that faded away by the time he was an adult. Hitler's dad, whose name was Alois Hitler, by the way, died when he was only 14 of a lung hemorrhage, after which he convinced his mom to put him in a different school, where his grades did improve, but not to what they were before his father put him in that science and technology school. Adolf really loved his mom. So when she died from breast cancer when he was 17, it took a real toll on him. By a very young age, he had lost a lot. His mom, his dad, and his little brother. Already sounding like a pretty dark origin story to me. About a year after his mom died, he moved to Vienna, the capital of Austria, with his friend August, with the hopes of becoming a famous painter. He and August rented a room together in Vienna, and they both applied to the Academy of Fine Art at Schillerplatz. August wanted to study music, and Hitler applied to their visual arts department, but only August was accepted, with Hitler being rejected twice. Tough. Eventually, he ran out of money, and without telling August, he moved out. Broke and friendless in a strange city, he ended up sleeping in homeless shelters and eating at the local soup kitchen. Now, Hitler was no Pablo Picasso, but he was talented, and so he would sell watercolor paintings in the city of Vienna on the street to make a little money. Ironically, a lot of his customers were Jews. They even found a couple of his unsold paintings in a Jewish shop a year before World War II kicked off. Anyhow, it was here in Vienna where Hitler was first heavily indoctrinated with pan-Germanism and anti-Semitism, as this was a very popular ideology in the culture at that time. Eventually, Hitler established a somewhat successful business selling his paintings thanks to the help of an acquaintance he made at one of the homeless shelters. But in 1913, the nation of Austria started to draft young men to the military to fight in World War I. But Hitler did not want to do that, so he attempted to escape by going to Munich, Germany. While in Germany, however, the authorities discovered Hitler and sent him back to Austria so that he could serve in the war. So Hitler goes back and shows up to be enlisted in the Austrian military, right? But then they reject him because according to their physical evaluation, he was too weak to serve in the military. And I don't know, maybe that hurt his ego or something, but Instead of using this as a get out of dying in a war card and going back to selling paintings, he goes back to Germany and then volunteers to serve in the Bavarian army, where he was accepted and enlisted as an infantryman. He then goes on to do surprisingly well in the military. He fought in a brutal battle known as the Battle of Ypres, which was also called the Massacre of the Innocents by the Germans because they got slaughtered. 40,000 Germans died in that battle. After that battle, he was promoted from private to lance corporal and became a message runner for the regimental headquarters, which was a much safer position seeing that the headquarters was located several miles behind the front lines. He then used this as an opportunity to learn absolutely everything he could about fighting a war. Reading incoming and outgoing orders and directives. He talked strategy with military officers. He studied both the German and enemy weaponry and vehicles. I'm talking like an autistic level of obsession. And if you've ever met an autistic kid who's into like Pokemon or something, you know exactly what I'm talking about. A couple other fun facts about Adolf Hitler. That was crazy. My bad. 1. His friends used to tease him about being averse to anything sexually explicit. And if you've ever hung out with military guys, you know that they love to crack dirty jokes. But Hitler would get embarrassed about that kind of stuff, so good for him. You know, I guess his Catholic upbringing didn't go to a complete waste. 2. He also adopted a stray dog while in the military and named it Foxel, which means little fox, and taught it a bunch of tricks and was just overall a dog lover. Isn't that weird? The same guy who loved to give belly rubs to his little puppy also gassed the Jews? Strange. Anyhow, he was awarded the honor of the Iron Cross First Class for his service, which was a prestigious award, especially for a lance corporal, and overall was seen as a hero by his fellow men. His World War I military campaign was finally brought to an end when he was caught in a British mustard gas attack, which temporarily blinded him and put him in the hospital. And just as he was starting to recover, he got the news that Germany had surrendered and lost the war, signing the Treaty of Versailles, taking all the blame for starting the war, and agreed to heavy economic sanctions and forced to demilitarize Rhineland. This news shocked Hitler so much that the blindness came back and prolonged his stay in the hospital. And it was here, in the hospital, that he had the idea that he would be the man to avenge Germany and restore it to glory. After the war, he continued to work for the military as an intelligence agent, with his first mission being to infiltrate the German Workers' Party, also known as the DAP. But as he was collecting information, he realized that he was kinda liking what these guys were saying, especially the leader of the party, Anton Drexler. Anton was another pan-Germanist anti-Semite, and that was kind of like Hitler's jam, you know? And so he quickly earned Anton's respect and was invited to become an official member of the party. Hitler got to work right away, spreading the DAP message and trying to grow the party, organizing their largest rallies where he would personally give speeches, preaching German unity, bashing the Treaty of Versailles, and trying to convince everyone why Jews should not be allowed to be German citizens. You know. Same old, same old. At this point, he started to get some pushback though, because, you know, there were German Jews who fought in World War I. In fact, it was actually a Jewish adjutant who nominated Hitler for his Iron Cross First Class reward. Embarrassing! So not all Germans were digging this anti-Semitic vibe, but a lot did. And so the party continued to grow. At the same time, Germany was becoming destabilized. Remember those economic sanctions we talked about? Yeah, Germany, after going into debt by borrowing money to fund their war efforts, was then required by the Treaty of Versailles to pay a $2 billion reparation bill, along with 26% of the value of their exports. So needless to say, Germany was up a creek without a paddle. And that creek ended in a waterfall called hyperinflation. And that's because Germany's only option to pay their bills was to just print money, which, man, I wish I could do. That would solve so many problems. But the thing about printing more money is, With every new dollar they print, the value of the money they already have in circulation goes down. Meaning, in no time, the cost of living in Germany skyrocketed to being 16 times what it was before the war. To put that in perspective, that would be like going into your local grocery store here in America, and instead of seeing bread for $3 a loaf, it was now being sold for $48 a loaf. And by 1922, less than 4 years after the war ended, the German mark was valued at 4,210,500,000,000 marks per USD. So in other words, worthless. It would have been more useful to light it on fire and use it to keep warm or cook. Which, by the way, due to the massive amounts of unemployment, people really did burn German money to stay warm during the winter. Things were bad. Violence and civil unrest swept the nation, prompting the prime minister to declare a state of emergency, where the state commissioner Gustav von Kahr was appointed to lead the nation. One day in November of 1923, Gustav was given a speech at a beer hall, which is like a large auditorium where people would go to drink beer. So, in German culture, that's where politicians talk to the people, I guess. Imagine if Joe Biden held a rally in a bar. That would be crazy, right? But not for the Germans. So Hitler pulls up to this Oktoberfest with 600 Nazi paramilitary troops and then takes Kahr and his associates into a private room by gunpoint. He then tries to persuade Kahr to endorse the Nazi party, but Kahr refused, primarily because it would make him look like a little sissy boy, seeing how he was just taken off stage at gunpoint by these same Nazis. So he couldn't then immediately endorse them right after, you know? So Hitler says, fair enough, and instead goes back out to the auditorium and gives a banger of a speech as to why he and the Nazis did what they did. Having caught some momentum with the people, the very next day he led a group of 2,000 in a march on the Bavarian Defense Ministry, where Nazi soldiers and the German police exchanged fire. 4 state policemen and 16 Nazis were killed in the exchange, and Hitler himself was wounded. 2 days later, Hitler was arrested and charged with treason. Having now captured the attention of the entire nation, Hitler used his high-profile trial as a chance to spread his message to all the people of Germany, and in so doing won the hearts of a large portion of the nation. He embraced the charges made against him and said that the true traitors were the German politicians that ended the war prematurely and stabbed the German people in the back. This rhetoric went over very well with the suffering German people. Predictably, Hitler was found guilty, but instead of being sentenced to life in prison, because, you know, he did lead an insurrection that resulted in the death of 4 police officers, he was only sentenced to a mere 5 years in prison with a possibility of parole after just 6 months. Wow. And he was treated like a rock star in prison. A spacious private cell, he could receive visitors whenever he wanted, he received gifts from the people. He even had a personal assistant, Rudolf Hess, who helped him to write down his infamous book, Mein Kampf, which means My Fight. In this book, he outlines and explains his political and racial ideologies, and man, it was bad. He divided humans into 3 races, the Aryans or master race, the subhumans, and the mediocre. Supposedly, the master race consisted of the Germans, the Austrians, and some Scandinavians, and Hitler believed that they should rule the world and should be served by an enslaved subhuman race, which consisted of the Slavic people, the Romani, and most notably, the Jews. Everyone else more or less fell in the mediocre race, which still wasn't a compliment by any means. It was this ideology which justified in Hitler's own mind why Germany had a right to capture the territories that were currently occupied by these subhuman races and enslave or eliminate the people living there. Hitler was released from prison after just 9 months and immediately set out to rebuild the Nazi party, which was banned at the time of his imprisonment. First, he negotiated with the Bavarian prime minister to lift the ban on the party, which the prime minister agreed to do so long as he wasn't going to do what he did last time. You know, tone it down a bit, keep it a little more peaceful. And so after agreeing to that, Hitler organized another massive rally of over 4,000 people and immediately went back to threatening the government, which resulted in him being banned from public speaking for 2 years. During these 2 years, Hitler got a lot of internal party work done, setting up a division whose goal was to overthrow the Democratic Republic, and another division known as the PO2, whose job was to prepare a government that would replace the Democratic Republic once it was overthrown. He set up a youth outreach program targeting boys between 15 and 18, basically his version of the Boy Scouts. Their highly disciplined paramilitary wing, known as the SA or the Storm Division, was properly defined with new uniforms with brown shirts, boots, a cap, and a swastika armband. The SS, or Protection Squad, consisted of the most elite soldiers from the SA and were responsible for protecting Hitler. And they wore black uniforms because they were supposed to be the cool guys. And with all this internal preparation done, all Hitler had to do was wait for the right moment to try and seize control of the German government through the democratic process. And that moment came in October of 1929 when the US stock market crashed, ushering in the Great Depression. Just as things were turning around for Germany under the leadership of its new president, Paul von Hindenburg, this new economic crash sent the German economy into yet another freefall, as millions of Germans lost their jobs. So by the time the next election cycle came around in 1932, Hitler was poised to run for office and take advantage of the desperation for change in the hearts and minds of the suffering German people. He ran for and won the position of chancellor, which made Hitler the head of the German government, with only the president above him in rank. He immediately put Nazi party leaders in positions of power, after which a mysterious fire started in the German parliament building, which is known as the Reichstag, and Hitler blamed the National Communist Party, who was a major opponent of the Nazi Party, for the fire. This event was used to enact the Reichstag Fire Decree, which allowed for the arrest and detainment of German citizens without trial. And through a series of other legal exploits and loopholes, Hitler managed to legally have 81 communist deputies arrested and prevented numerous social democrats from attending parliamentary votes. This made the Nazi Party the overwhelming majority in parliament, and thus turned the German government into a legal Nazi dictatorship. By 1933, through the use of imprisonments, violence, and intimidation, the Nazi Party was the only legal political party left in the nation. And finally, to cement his position of power, Hitler ordered the execution of over 85 people and the arrest of thousands, some of which were even longtime supporters of the Nazi Party. But if they posed a threat to Hitler in any way, he wanted them gone. This purging became known as the Night of the Long Knives. Lastly, a law was passed to eliminate the office of president once the current president retired or died. Guess what happened a day after this law was passed? Let's just say President Hindenburg was no longer the president, and it wasn't because he retired. Wink, wink. He died. Mysteriously, of course. This gave Hitler all the powers of the president along with the power of being chancellor, creating a new all-powerful office of Führer und Reichskanzler. With this power firmly cemented within the government, he then focused all of his attention on going to war. Hitler ordered the seizure of German assets who were identified as enemies of the state, so mainly the Jews, and then used these assets to reinvigorate the economy and fund the war. This is probably how they found those Hitler paintings in the Jewish shops, by the way. Hitler then pulled Germany out of the League of Nations and the World Disarmament Conference, which was basically Hitler saying, listen man, I don't want no new friends. If you want smoke, it's free smoke, and that's on Munich. What's up? He grew the military to 600,000 troops, 6 times bigger than what was agreed upon by the Treaty of Versailles. And then he reoccupied Rhineland, which also broke the treaty. He did make a few attempts to broker a peace agreement between Germany and Britain, but Britain basically told him to get lost, and then he was like, psych, I didn't even want to be friends in the first place. And then by 1939, Hitler put his foot on the gas and captured Prague to use their assets to further fund his war efforts. So with his inventory completely stocked and maxing out his health bar along with making allies with Japan and Italy, he was ready to go to war. And on September 1st of 1939, Germany invaded Western Poland under the pretext that Poland had violated the Treaty of Versailles. A treaty which we know Hitler has never respected or honored. Once he invaded Poland, Britain and France declared war on Germany, and with that, World War II had officially begun. I sure do hope you enjoyed today's video and maybe even learned something new about the most infamous man to have ever lived. If you made it this far, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And let me know what topic in history you want me to cover next. The book I used to assist me to research this topic was Adolf Hitler, Alive from Beginning to End. And I have provided a link to this book in the description if you want to purchase it. There were many more interesting details about the life of Adolf Hitler that didn't make it into this video, and so if you want a more in-depth look at his life, I highly recommend it. It's a pretty quick and easy read. This has been the origin story of Adolf Hitler by The Almanac.